back to Speaking with Confidence, a podcast that helps you build the soft skills that lead to real results. Communication, storytelling, public speaking, and showing up with confidence in every conversation that counts. I'm Tim Newman, a recovering college professor turned communication coach, and I'm thrilled to guide you on your journey to becoming a powerful communicator. Today's guest is Maria Rincon. Maria is a Colombian Chinese TV host and United Nations communications consultant turned public speaking coach. Maria, welcome to the show.
Hi.
It's so good to have you. When we talked before, in our normal pre-show talk, I was really impressed with the incredible amount of diversity and background that you bring. And one of the things that really struck me was the work that you do with did with the UN. Can you give us a little bit of background on that?
Definitely. So my journey with the UN started as an intern when I was completing my master's in business journalism. And I wanted to use my communication skills for quote unquote the good. So after working in TV for 3 years, I decided that I didn't want any more of the entertainment industry. I wanted to use my communication skills for the better. And that's how I went into the United Nations. Now, my role was a communications intern, and then I worked myself up to a communications consultant. And it was mostly internal and external communications. So knowledge management, hosting knowledge management webinars for the internal teams, cross-functional roles, but also external communications such as social media, including videos, as well as LinkedIn and X, or back then it was called Twitter.
Yeah, that's amazing. You're the first person I've ever spoken with that's worked at the United Nations. What was that like? The day in, day out. We all know what we see on TV. Just a bunch of diplomats and bureaucrats filing in and out and giving their talks, giving their speeches, what have you. What's it like really on the inside and the behind the scenes? And if you can speak specifically about the communications that go on between, let's just say, the office that you were in and other offices for other countries, in the UN.
Yeah, so I think the UN looks very shiny from the outside. So I'm sure that listeners are very curious about what the day-to-day looked like. And not to let you down, but I have to be honest that it's just a very bureaucratic organization like any other. And what I found was the most incredible part of it was working with teammates that were from all over the world. So I sat in a team with people from Denmark, from Afghanistan, from the US, another Canadian, from South America, from Mexico, from France and Portugal. So it was a very multicultural team. And that's why I think I really enjoyed my time there, because I got to meet people that everyone speaks 4 or 5 languages. They've traveled a lot. Wow. And we all had a common mission in mind. So that was really cool.
And how many languages do you speak?
So I speak 4. I speak Spanish, Espanol. I was born in Colombia. My dad's Colombian. I speak Mandarin Chinese. My mom's from Sichuan, which is known for hot pot and pandas. I speak English, and I also speak Cantonese, which is a dialect of southern China spoken in Hong Kong.
That's amazing. And you travel all over the place. Where are you now? I think last time we spoke, you were in Spain?
So I'm in Europe right now, and I'm currently based in Sweden. And I have family back home in Vancouver. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. To be able to do that and travel again, not only do you get to see and experience different things, but you can bring it back and you can kind of incorporate it and be able to really have better interactions with a wide number of people. I spoke with somebody just a couple of days ago who grew up in Africa, primarily was educated in the UK, but has worked with corporations all over the world. And, kind of what she says is, you have to really kind of learn the different cultures. And that really does help you grow in all kinds of ways, but especially in how we communicate with others.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I can relate to this so much. And currently I'm reading a book called The Culture Map. And it's just put into perspective what I experience in day to day as a communicator, but adding like frameworks and different ways of looking at things. So adding theoretical point of view for it. So for example, A lot of cultures are a bit more direct in their communication style, while others are indirect. And
Mhm.
you can say that's obvious. I can give you
Right.
a very specific example about my personal relationship. So, for example, my husband is German, and he's very direct in his
Yeah.
communication style. And for me, growing up in Canada, I'm like, it's just a little bit harsh. So I like the sandwich approach. And, receiving and giving feedback is super important
Yeah.
in the workplace. And I've also adapted to giving feedback in different ways to my colleagues in the past, but also now to my clients, because
Mhm.
it really makes or breaks the relationship.
It does, and I think especially the younger generations, and when I'm talking about that, I'm really talking about the people that are in college now who don't maybe not have a lot of outside experiences. They, they get lost there if they're thrown into that type of environment where they get an internship or a job or travel someplace, and they don't understand that maybe the culture, like you said, maybe the directness. I remember the first time that I went to overseas and into the Far East. I had to learn really, really quickly to not be as direct as I am. Because I'm Irish German, so I do have a lot of that. Here we go, and
Get
plus
to the point.
East Coast United States. So that's what it is. But again, it's okay to learn and to step back and to really try and integrate into other people's cultures when you're in that environment.
Absolutely. And it's also something I grew up with. My mom is
Mhm.
Chinese, my dad is Colombian. I had so many different
That's so
communication
awesome.
styles
Yeah.
growing up with that. And actually, working in China, I had to learn to read between the lines because a lot of the direct communication actually happened underneath the layer of what people were saying. So I would never get a direct no, but I would have to infer that what they were saying was kind of beating around the bush.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
So I'm going to kind of date some things here, and it's funny that we're doing this recording today on November 12th. So you're literally 1 year out. On November 13th of 2024, you made your very first public speaking with Maria Instagram post announcing your transition to a public
Oh,
speaking
well.
coach. How about that? So 1 year ago today. So what have you learned, and what has the last 12 months been like for you?
I love that you did that research. Thanks, Tim. It's been a journey, and I'm going to start with the positive. So, the positive has been
Mhm.
that I've actually found what I love to do, and that has to do with storytelling and communication and working
Mhm.
with people. And at the bottom of it, yes, it's teaching frameworks. Yes, it's teaching things like body language and voice. But at the foundation of it is essentially empowering people with more confidence in their communication. And it makes me so happy to see that the people that I work with have achieved real results, uh, getting promotions or doing
Mhm.
presentations that they've received great feedback on, and kind of also working on their imposter syndrome. So that has been the most exciting part for me. Now, as someone with background in communications, my background is definitely not in business or marketing. And so I've grown a lot in the last year in kind of having more of a strategic business mindset.
Mhm.
And it has not been easy, to say the least. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So from the beginning, I started off as just being a communications coach to individuals at companies. And it's grown to now working with more technical team members in companies. So, engineers at Meta in New York, director of AI at a big public relations firm, and senior vice president at a huge hotel booking company in Southeast Asia. My clients are from
Wow.
all over the world. And it's made me realize, like, wow,
Mhm.
uh, it's because of this upbringing that I had that I'm very lucky to be able to tap into different cultures, that I get to work with incredible people from around the world. And now my next exciting big step is that I'm going to be doing some more corporate workshops. So essentially, my dream would be to go around the world and do corporate workshops, teaching more about intercultural communication. But of course, at the
Mhm.
heart of it, it's storytelling and presentation skills. So 1 year ago, I did not expect to be where I am today, but I love it. I love it.
That's That's so good to hear. Especially from the standpoint of how much you've already grown just in that first year. Your skill set, how much your skill set has grown. Talk a little bit about the marketing, where where aspect where you say you weren't prepared for that. What have you learned from that perspective? Because um, you part of communication is, and part of what we do as coaches is, number one, we do have to market ourselves, and that personal professional brand, and marketing us as that. But what have you learned about helping others in developing their personal professional, helping them develop their personal and professional brands as well?
That's a very good question. I'm going to take it from two angles. So,
Hmm.
from the external skills part, it's
Hmm.
essentially understanding the system of how marketing
Yeah.
works. So, it's everything from learning about email marketing, newsletters, content production on
Hmm.
LinkedIn, on social media, and then writing blogs, just expanding that digital footprint online so that people can find you, but also learning how to position myself, because anyone can teach communications. There are thousands of public speaking coaches out there, but really finding what makes me unique and tailoring that to my ICP, my ideal customer profile. Now, on the deeper part of this, one of the things I've learned is to also work on my own self confidence in this journey. I think
Hmm.
one of the biggest things that I was allergic to was cold outreach, because I felt like, oh, what if I'm overstepping with people? Or maybe deep inside, I was afraid of rejection. However, now I realize to not take that personally and just be confident and understand that, hey, what I teach, what I provide has value, and to not
Hmm.
take a no personally. So that has been one of the biggest learning curves in my own personal
Hmm.
growth in this business. Because it's funny to be the one teaching people how to be confident in their communication, but I also have to own up to it and
Yeah.
lead by example.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, number one, I like that you said that you're allergic to it. I've never heard it put that way, but I think I'm going to steal that phrase, because I'm also allergic to that, very much so. And I appreciate your honesty with that, because as coaches, we're supposed to be the ones that have it all together, but
Mm.
we're really no different than anybody else. We have some of the same thoughts, anxieties, issues, problems that everybody else has. And I think it's good for the our clients and the people that we're coaching, for them to see us that way, which helps them relate to us, which helps us, which also makes it easier for us to help them as well.
Yes. I think relatability is a big thing.
Mhm.
And for people to overcome something like the fear of public speaking or
Mhm.
glossophobia, there needs to be connection. There needs to be, on the other
Mhm.
end of the coach, like someone that understands what they're going through, can relate, creates a safe space for
Yeah.
non-judgmental growth. So that's what I think.
So let me ask you a question about non-judgmental growth, because that to me, that to me is also kind of a mindset shift from the individual, because the only to me the only people that judge, that are doing judgment is ourselves, right? I mean, when we're coaching other people, or when there's other people in the room, when you're on a team, they're not really doing that judgment. You messed up, you know whatever. You can't stand up and talk about this project that you're working on in front of our team. Nobody is actually even thinking about that. So again, that's just, to me, that's another layer of that imposter syndrome, where that that we're judging ourselves, as
So
opposed to
much.
just you know rolling with it, and getting over it.
Yes, I'm a big fan of teaching the
Mhm.
spotlight effect. So
Mhm.
essentially, this study done at Cornell University where they put this student in a Barry Manila shirt back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and they made him walk around campus. And at the end of the day, they asked him, "What percentage of people do you think noticed your shirt?" And he looked down at his shirt. He's like, "Oh God, this, oh, I don't know, like 50%." Then they surveyed the
Yeah.
students at the university, and it turns out it was only 25%. So we definitely have this huge negativity bias on ourselves and
Yeah.
tend to just over amplify the little things that we think are wrong with us when it's actually not the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny you talk about a shirt. So this morning, my wife's in she sells real estate, and she does a couple other things, and she was getting dressed this morning, and she had to meet a couple of clients, and she got all upset. And said, "What's going on?" She said, "I've got something on my shirt." I looked at it. I couldn't even see it. I said, "What do you? What is it?" She said, "Well, I can't wear this. They're gonna see the stain." I said, "You, if you need to change, but I wouldn't necessarily worry about that because they're not that's not what they're worried about. They're worried about making sure that you're giving them, good information so they can buy a piece of property." And
So did she
so
change
again,
in the end?
I don't think she did.
Okay.
But again, okay. So again, I wasn't even looking at the shirt. Back to your point. Because I was preparing for. I had another interview before you, and then after this, I've got another meeting, and then another meeting. So I'm listening and paying attention to her, but that's not where my focus is. And the reality is, and maybe it's just me as a guy. I don't know, but I don't notice clothes like that. I just don't. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. So I don't
Yeah.
know. But anyway, so you've moved into the technical sector, and one of the things that we talked about in the pre-call was that technical professionals, they struggle with foreign language speak anxiety. I can see that because it seems to me that they struggle with communication to begin with, just from what they do and the type of person that gets into that field. But what does foreign language anxiety actually look like, and how do you help them work through that?
So yeah, FLSA, what's that tongue twister there? Foreign language speech anxiety or speaking anxiety. It's just when you're speaking in a different language other than your native tongue, and basically pile on exactly what we were talking about just now. The imposter syndrome, not able to get your own ideas across, feeling like you're being judged for your accent, feeling like you can't get the message directly as you would like. So it's kind of like not having confidence in your communication, but amplified because you're not completely fluent, or you feel you're not completely fluent in the language that you're communicating in. And so, because I work with so many international professionals and they all work in the common language, which is English, they come from different backgrounds, and this is something that they struggle with. And a lot of the times, what I've realized, it's not that they need more vocabulary or that they need to work on their accent. It's essentially just about, number one, gaining more confidence in themselves. But number two, a very easy trick, which is just to speak slower. Because when we slow down, we're able to give the other person a bigger chance to understand our words. And all accents are beautiful. I think that's what I've tried to teach my clients, that it's not something that they should feel ashamed about.
Right. And I'm glad you said that, because I spoke with somebody about a year ago who they were told from mid-teenage years up to about mid-20s that they had to work on changing their accent because people couldn't understand them, and that really kind of set him back and really kind of gave him a lot of anxiety until he got into his late 20s and early 30s and was working with a coach, and they said, "Don't worry about what your accent is. Just like you said, slow down and people will hear you, and then people will actually relate to you, and then your accent becomes who you are and becomes a talking point, a talking piece, where you're from, how, that those types of things." So putting so much pressure on your accent and where you're from, I think has not done a lot of people a good service.
And what I'd love to add to that point is essentially that reframe that just happens there, right? When
Right.
seeing the accent as something negative, but now seeing it as something positive.
Right. And but I let's take that a step further. We always go to the negative in pretty much everything that we do, is internally or what other people say. If we were to switch that around for most things, how much better and how much more growth will we see from others if we look at it from a positive perspective, or approach things from that bent.
Yes. One thing that I always tell my clients to do that actually is a very simple exercise, but gets them to reframe in real time
Hmm.
is something called an evidence log. So it's essentially like an
Mm.
achievement list, but we say it's called an evidence log because it's clear proof that you have strengths, that you've overcome challenges, and you have positive qualities about yourself. So it's very
Hmm.
simple. It's just a table with columns. And essentially, it's starting with the date of an event, the event itself, what action you took, what went well, how you felt afterwards, and what this tells you about yourself. And then I get them to fill out maybe 6 or 8 of those columns. And maybe 2 or 4 are personal, and then the other 4 are related to their professional life or public speaking and communication. And at the end, when they read all their strengths or what these experiences
Hmm.
tell them about themselves, they're able to just have a look and be like, wow, this is undeniable proof that
Right.
I'm a great human being. And it's because our brain is always on that negative bias. So this exercise is something that I recommend to the listeners out there.
Yeah, that's actually a good exercise. Because like you said, everything most things are negative. Most feedback is negative.
Hmm.
And to be able to make that mindset shift that everything is negative, and if we look at things differently, we're going to see so much more positive. And I was listening to a podcast probably about a week ago, and somebody in a CEO in a major corporation was saying that he got to a point where he was getting so much negative feedback from people around him, he had to tell his his coach, I need you to tell me how good I am until I can wrap my head around all this other negative stuff. And then at one point, about maybe 6 to 9 months later, he said, you know what? Okay, now let's get back to looking at how I can improve, because I've learned how to take in and actually process the negativity, push away the things that aren't appropriate and accept the things that are. And is a pretty big mindset shift.
Wow. And it seems like that person was going through quite a bit. So
Yes.
I'm glad that they were able to express that to their
Yeah.
coach, and
Hmm.
the coach was able to provide like a little haven, even though it was temporary, until
Right.
they could create that mindset shift for themselves.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the younger generations, or the younger professionals, and how they communicate differently than we do. So what do you think has changed most between the Gen Z and the
Mhm.
millennials, and how they communicate?
I don't have direct sources. So I'm gonna give you my 2 cents and what I've
Yes.
experienced or what I
Hmm.
see online, etc. That I unfortunately don't work with Gen Zs yet. I would love to. I would love to work with more students as well. I think
Hmm.
that's where the real impact comes.
Hmm.
Oh, but actually, I have recently. So I worked with a student at Babson College, and
Okay.
she was a junior student that was coming from Indonesia.
Okay.
And I think in my head, well, we give Gen Z a bad rep, to be honest. We give Gen Z a bad rep about how they communicate, either that they can't take feedback too directly or that they don't make
Hmm.
eye contact when you order at a coffee shop, etc. But she
Hmm.
was a perfect example of a really driven, ambitious young professional that knew the importance of communication skills in taking her academic and also professional career to the next
Hmm.
level. So she had basically opened up her own NGO where she saw that in Indonesia, there was a lot of corn grazing. There was a lot of farms that were growing corn, and the
Okay.
corn musks were being thrown away and burned. So that was a negative impact on the environment. What she did was that she encouraged local women and girls to make bags and wallets and shoes out of essentially sewing the corn what are they called,
The husk.
the husks together, exactly. And from there they could sell them in local markets and in the villages. And essentially she was telling me her story while she was preparing for an interview for an employer. So she's the
Hmm.
perfect example of someone that is dedicated, knows what she wants,
Hmm.
has a big heart, and has a big goal in mind in life. So that's my direct source for a Gen Z, actually. How do
Well,
you see it, though? I'm curious because you're also an ex-professor, correct? Or former
yeah,
professor.
yes. So I see both sides of the coin, right? So, in for me, there's the high achievers and the middle, and then lower achievers in every generation. I would say this about the Gen Z as a whole: they are probably the smartest generation I've ever taught,
Hmm.
and I can't figure out necessarily why that is. But even as I look at my granddaughter who's 5, she's so, at 5, she is so much smarter than my daughters were at 5. And I can't
Wow.
figure out why that is. But when you talk about Gen Z, not only are they the smartest, they're also the most entrepreneurial. And your example with with young lady from Indonesia is a point to that. But the problem that they have is that communication style. And where let's just say people from my generation, I'm an Xer. I mean, I'm on that X boomer line, so I'm much older, and I think I put a lot of that on us as from that generation. There's, and I'm talking about my generation now. There's a lot of complaining. There's a lot of this generation this and this generation that, but there's no outreach. There's no truly trying, where there's very little truly trying to reach out to them and build those connections and try and figure out or uh, learn how they communicate so that we can make things better. It's complain, complain, complain. And we know that the younger generation is not going to reach out if the older generation doesn't. So there's there's that gap. And I tell people all the time, stop complaining about it. Figure out a way that you can reach out to that generation and build bridges. Figure out why they're doing what they're doing. Figure out what their priorities are. My priorities of work are very, very different than even my own kids. Different generations and those types of things, because it's up to, you're the one that's the leader, right? Figure it out. And me personally, I try and surround myself with younger generations all the time. Not just because I'm 12 mentally, but that's where I get my strength from.
Hmm.
Learning what they're learning from them. Because they're going to be seen and doing things that I have no idea about. And if I want to get better, the only way for me to get better is to learn what's coming and put effort into them. So there's that.
Definitely. Intergenerational communication
Mhm.
is so important. I think at the foundation of it is that
Yeah.
number one, that self-awareness, and then number two,
Mhm.
that empathy, to be
Right.
like, okay, what do you care about? It's not just about where I want to talk about what I care about, but
Mhm.
what do you care about? How do you see the world? How do I listen to that? How do I connect with
Yeah.
understanding with that? Hmm.
Even some of the terminology that they use. So like my youngest daughter is 33. Okay. And so she's even, I guess she's a millennial, I guess. I don't know. And when I go and I start doing what I do, and I'll pick up terminology that the Gen Z is using, and then I'll start talking to her in Gen Z language, and it really upsets her. I mean, it really upsets her. She says, "Dad, stop talking like that." I said, "Well, you better figure this out because she has a child now." And I said, "You better figure this out so that you, number one, so you can know what they're talking about. Number two, that so you can. I'm not talking about being the cool mom, but you can actually communicate with them. And you're at a point when you're about ready to start really stepping into some serious leadership roles. You have to be able to connect and communicate with these people. So I do it
At all
jokingly,
levels.
but also, understand that you're going to have to figure some of this stuff out.
Yes, this reminds me when I was coaching this girl from Indonesia. She always said, I gotta," when in the interview questions that
Uh,
were going over.
uh,
And I was like, I'm for me, it's not a big deal, but in these
mhm.
formal interviews where you're talking to employers and it's a business setting, you can't say I gotta.
I
And then
got it
another
right.
thing yeah. And then the other thing is they would always end the sentence with, so yeah. So it was like, so yeah, this, so yeah, so yeah. I
Mhm.
and I was like, we
Yeah.
gotta fix it. It's not wrong. It's it's a polishing that needs to be done for specific interview cases.
Yeah, the one that gets me is I feel like. I feel like. Okay, great. I'm
I
glad
think
you
I
feel that
still
way.
do that as well.
I'm glad you feel that way, but you know, but that's also habit, and that's also nervousness. That's also the tics. Whatever it is, and we all have them. And but again, it's learning what they are, and being able to control that. Like what you said before, slow down, take a pause, and think through your answer, think through your statement, whatever it's going to be, and a lot of times those things will just go away. So how about the way that they approach work, the younger generation? So my guess is you're probably, I would never ask you how old you are. I know better. I'm not supposed to do that. But my guess is you're probably in my daughter's generation.
Yes, I'm not a Gen Z.
Um, how do you look at the I wouldn't say work ethic, but the way you approach work and personal time compared to the way whether it's Gen Z or Gen X or the boomers approach it, and how have you gone about communicating that with both of those as well, so that they understand where you're actually coming from and why you do the things that you do and how you approach work and personal time the way that you do?
I want to take it from the client's perspective because maybe
Okay.
that's more relatable for the people listening.
Mm-hmm.
So a
Yeah.
lot of my clients are probably, I would say, millennials, late millennials,
Mm-hmm.
working professionals at huge companies, international organizations, companies around the world. They are ambitious, hardworking. They do more than the 40 hours a week, and they are always striving to get better at the things that they're not. So their work ethic, on top of having a very demanding job and
Mm-hmm.
investing in themselves and investing in communication skills, is very admirable. And
Mm-hmm.
so the work ethic I see in them is like, wow, they're hustling.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, I grew up in a very strict household with a tiger mom. So that's a Chinese saying for a very strict mom. They say huma. And essentially I was under a lot of pressure to get straight A's. I couldn't date in high school. If I went out, for example, today, I couldn't go out tomorrow. So I couldn't have fun 2 days in a row. And my weekends,
I'm not seeing any problem in that. Okay, go ahead.
and weekends were filled with not sleeping in. So getting up early at 8 a.m., doing chores and going to Chinese school and all these extracurricular activities. So they shaped me to become the person I am today. And I'm thankful for that. But I realized that I also put a lot of pressure on myself as a kid. And that led me to overachieving, to going into beauty pageants and working in television, then striving to go into the UN and always looking for these markers of success and not really asking myself, what is success for me internally? So now I'm at a point where I'm trying to find the balance between work and enjoying life, but also knowing that it's like the hustle time currently at this age. However, moving to Sweden has shown me a very different side because in the Nordics, work-life balance is insane. As in, on a Friday afternoon at 3 or 4 p.m., the office is empty. Everyone's off to pick up their kids. Parental leave is paid for almost 400 days. And essentially, everything is closed during the summer. So people take 6 weeks off. No one answers their emails. And it's something that's normalized here in the Nordics. So that's my cultural take on
That's amazing.
hard work. Yeah, it's very different.
So how do you adjust to that? Because, I take a weekend off and I'm like, okay, it's time to get back to checking email, making phone calls, and
That's
that
awesome.
sort of thing. You know,
You like to stay busy.
I do. I do.
Mhm.
So how do you deal with it?
So for me, essentially, I have the good balance of the hard work ethic from my Chinese side, but I
Hmm.
also have the work hard, play hard side from my Colombian culture. So I'm focusing on enjoying the present, but also on working hard. Yeah. For
Well,
me, what that
well,
looks like is essentially now that I'm an entrepreneur or have my own business and now as a public speaking coach, I also tend to work on weekends as well. Not because
mhm.
I'm forced to, but because I also want to.
Want to,
I
right?
have a bigger flame because it's like a mission that I'm driving versus working for a company. And so I want to put in more work because I'm also passionate about it.
And I think that's really the key. If you're passionate about what you do, you're it's much easier to go about and doing those types of things as opposed to, I look at it, you get to or you have to, right?
Yes.
You have to go to work. I get to do the things that I want to do, right?
Mhm.
That's a big thing. It when you're working for somebody else, even though you still may enjoy it, a lot of times there is that I can't do that because I have to go do this. Um, but when you're doing when you at least I've found for me, again, now working for myself, um, yeah, I still can't go do that, but I still get to go do these other things that I want to do and need to get done so that maybe I can get to do those other things another time. It's not that have to type of thing.
And it's much more rewarding, I think, at the
Yeah.
end of the day.
Yeah.
It has its ups and
Absolutely.
downs,
Hmm.
but it's
Absolutely.
definitely much more rewarding.
Absolutely. And let's talk about storytelling real quick before we go. A lot of people don't see um, the importance or the power in telling stories. So for those that don't see that, how do you get them to step forward and to incorporate, number one, developing stories and then incorporating those stories into an interview or presentation or team meeting, things of that nature?
Listeners out there who don't think stories are important, I'm going to give you a number, and it's 22. Okay. So stories are 22 times more memorable than facts alone through a study by Stanford University. I think it was called the Women's Innovation Hub. So you can fact check that for me, Tim, but I'm sure that's the correct statistic.
Yeah.
The other thing here is for those that do know that storytelling is important, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. And it's that the best leaders out there know how to communicate value through stories
Mhm.
because they have something called a story bank.
Mhm.
So if you are thinking, well, I do want to tell stories, but I don't know where to start, here are some tips on what stories to think about. So, number one is your origin story. So, who you are, where you come from, what you're working on right now, and the why behind that. So, why is it that you do so important? Number two, it's the challenge and transformation story. So, what challenge have you gone through in your life that makes you who you are today? And what has that taught you about yourself? And then number three, it's a success story. So something that you're proud of, that you bring value to other people, or a lesson that you can share through sharing that success.
Mhm.
So those are three stories that you can already start to think about. And some of you may think that some people are just born extroverted and born natural storytellers, but it's actually a skill that you can learn.
Yeah.
And stories are repeated countless times and they come naturally, but it's also the work you have to do in number one, writing out the story and then practicing it. And
Yeah.
an insider tip is that to have different versions of your story. So have a 30-second elevator pitch of your story, have the 3-minute version for a presentation or a podcast. Well, maybe not 3 minutes, that's a little long. Let's say 2 minutes. And then have the 10-minute version for when you are with close friends or building trust with an important team member or a client. So essentially, figure out what your 3 top stories are for your story bank, continue to understand the importance of them, and tailor them to a different time frames to start using them in your everyday life.
Yeah. And don't put too much pressure on yourselves either because they're your stories. You lived them.
Mm,
You if you say something that's maybe a little off, nobody's gonna know. It's you lived it. I'm not telling you to purposely lie, but as you're telling the story, right? As you're
yeah.
telling the story, it's your story. But to your point is you have to practice them, and you have to know when to pull story A or story B or whatever it is, and make sure that it's appropriate for whatever situation that 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 you're in. And that's one of the things that I'm really working on right now with my coach.
Hmm,
We're developing a bunch of 3-minute stories,
nice.
a bunch of them, so that depending on where I'm at or what stage I'm on, I can take I can have a whole bunch to be able to put into the plan that would actually fit, that they're already there. It's much easier to put a keynote together if you have a bunch of stories that you can fit in different places. But it does take time, and it does take practice, and you do have to find the right stories at the right time. But um, the more of those things that you can do, the better off you are.
And don't be discouraged if the story doesn't come through the first time or people
Yeah.
miss it like a joke or etc. It's just a practice.
Mm-hmm.
So practice makes perfect in this scenario, and it's about yeah building that muscle of storytelling.
Absolutely. And it's, just, from my perspective, some of the stories that I'm telling, even my wife hasn't heard yet. So
Hmm.
when I write a story, um, I'll send it. I'll do it. First thing I do is and I'm not saying the way I do it is the right way. The very first thing that I do is I brain dump. I just brain dump it in there, organize it, and script it, and then I'll put it in a teleprompter and read it, and then I'll get better at the emotional and the tone type of thing, and then I'll let my wife listen to it, and she'll say I've never heard that before.
Hmm.
So there's I got a few of them, and then I send them off to my coach, and he's looking at the terminology that I'm using, the pacing, the breaths, all those different types of things, and he sends me back feedback, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me? You know, this is the first time I'm telling that story. You want me to do this?" And he laughs and say, "If you don't start doing it now, you could tell that story 15 times, and then you get into a rut of telling that story, and then it's so much harder to make the changes that you actually want to make. So
Mhm.
make the changes earlier, and then that also becomes a practice of being better at it later."
Yes. And I think that's the perfect approach, honestly,
Yeah.
to brain dump first, to just have all your ideas on a piece of paper or on notes on your laptop, and then figure out which stories really speak to you the most, but also what you
Mm-hmm.
want to share, whether that's values or experiences, strengths, challenges, etc. And then drilling yourself by practicing on camera and having live
Yeah.
feedback. I think that's awesome. I think one
Yeah.
of the biggest things some of my clients struggle with in storytelling is that they get tired of telling a story again and again, or it feels too robotic or too rehearsed. And the tip that I have here is to every time you're telling this story, to put yourself into the story itself. So
Mm-hmm.
tell it as it's happening in this moment. Of
Right.
course, there are techniques in language and how you say things, but using language that can really help take you back into that specific moment. So you're essentially transporting the audience into that story with you instead of you just narrating something, and that after many many times could also have like an emotional disconnect because it's been repeated so much.
Yeah, exactly. And if you can make them feel like they're there with you,
Mhm.
that's gold. It's gold.
Yes,
So
because
it,
if they're there with you, they also feel with you. So
they feel with it, right?
mhm.
Right. They feel that exact same emotion that you're feeling, and it makes it makes the story come off almost like it's natural, like you're truly right there in that moment. Uh, but what if you think back to your early career? What's one communication mistake that taught you a lasting impression?
Ooh, very interesting question. A communication mistake that I made
Yes.
that I've had to fix. let me know how I did in this podcast. But as a Latina, I speak so fast. And even though I am a public speaking coach and I teach communications, I've done a TEDx talk, been on countless stages and behind the camera or in front of the camera,
Mhm.
I speak way too fast sometimes. And before it was maybe nerves, sometimes I just get very excited.
Mhm.
So what I continue to work on is speaking a little bit slower. So that's one mistake I did in the past. I spoke way too
Mhm.
fast, and it gave the impression that I was trying to finish speaking as quickly as possible because I was
Mhm.
nervous. And
Right.
that also portrayed me as someone that wasn't very confident because it made me seem like I wasn't confident enough to take up the space to talk. So temporal confidence in not only how I stand or how I walk, but also how fast I speak. And
Mhm.
I actually just attribute it to a cultural thing. Spanish is such a fast language
Very
in
fast, right?
comparison to English. But it's something that I've had to tweak and continue to tweak over the years.
So how about speed in terms of Spanish and Chinese?
Ooh, that's a good question. I still feel like so one of the two quickest languages in terms of tempo in the world are Japanese and Spanish. I don't know where
Okay.
Chinese falls on there,
Okay.
but Spanish is definitely a very quick one, and it's my mother
Mhm.
tongue. So,
Well, I'm a fast talker as well, and
hmm,
part of that for me is I've got ADHD, so my mouth is trying to keep up with my brain, and it's impossible. But anyway, as I think about it, Spanish, and depending on where you are, at least in the United States, how fast you speak, right? So the Northeast United States, these people talk really fast. The Southern United States is kind of have a slow draw.
hmm,
Midwestern is kind of, I wouldn't say slow, but just kind of a even keel, medium paced, type of thing. And so, even American English, depending on where you're from, you've got to be cognizant of your normal, your normal pace when you're speaking.
yes, and I think it's also maybe if we simplified, it's like big cities are fast people,
Yeah.
walking pace, speaking fast because time is running out
Hmm.
versus outside of those big cities, people just have more time. People just have more room for making conversation, and it's a little bit slower.
Well, Maria, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Where can people connect with you?
So I am quite active on LinkedIn. I write about public speaking tips, communication tips, as well as things like imposter syndrome and confidence. So I'm on LinkedIn as Maria C. Rincon. Or if you'd like to find out more about what I do, you can find me at www.publicspeakingwithmaria.com.
That's awesome. And I'll put all those links in the show notes. But Maria, it has been my pleasure. I've really enjoyed the conversation with you. I love the diversity and the cultural diversity. I've learned a lot. Like, number one, the last piece, I had no idea that Spanish and Japanese were probably the two fastest paced language in the world. And then, really trying to think about how you, especially somebody like you who speaks four different languages. God bless you. I speak dad and then English, so I speak two, and and to be able to be as good as you are doing that's just amazing. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
Aw, Tim, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure as well.
All right, you take care, and we'll talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye.
Be sure to visit speakingwithconfidencepodcast.com to get your free ebook, The Top 21 Challenges for Public Speakers and How to Overcome Them. You can also register for the Forming for Public Speaking course. Always remember, your voice has the power to change the world. We'll talk to you next time. Take care. That's it for today's episode. But before you go, don't forget to grab your copy of my brand new book, Connections That Count: How to Transform Your Network into Influence, leadership, and career growth, available now on Amazon. It's time to turn your network into real influence and career growth. Pick it up today and start making your connections count.